Jurassic World Rebirth will include a scene from the original Jurassic Park novel, says screenwriter David Koepp. This is one of the best bits of news for the movie, in my opinion. The original Jurassic Park novel is full of amazing and horrific moments, many of which none of the 6 movies so far have drawn from. Let's get into it. David Koepp has done an interview with Variety. The interview is predominantly about another movie he wrote called Presence, and the article is linked below if you want to read it in full. But at the very end, the interviewer asked him about his return to the Jurassic franchise, noting that, unlike the last 2 entries into the franchise that David Koepp wrote, Jurassic World Rebirth is not based on either of the novels, to which David replied, "I reread the 2 novels to get myself back in that mode though. We did take some things from them. There was a sequence from the first novel that we'd always wanted in the original movie but didn't have room for. We were like, hey, we get to use that now. But just to get back in that headspace 30 years later, is it still fun?" And the answer is yes, it still really is. Dinosaurs are still fun. Of course, he didn't spoil what moment from the novel he is talking about, but I have a couple ideas that could be possible, including some evidence pointing to one in particular. But do share in a comment down below which novel scene you think or hope it might be. And if you want to make sure that you don't miss out on any Jurassic World Rebirth news, subscribe to the channel. A quick aside, there is a difference between a scene and a sequence. I've used the words scene and sequence interchangeably so far because most people do, but they are not the same. A scene is most simply defined as a single, uninterrupted action in a single location. A scene ends when the location changes, when there's a time jump, or when more characters enter the location. A sequence is made up of several scenes that together build up towards a climactic moment in the narrative. A sequence can include scenes in several locations with time jumps in between that just have to be interconnected, building towards something. So when trying to figure out which novel moment David Koepp lifted from the pages to include in Jurassic World Rebirth, we have a couple of parameters. He says it's a sequence, not a scene, and as a screenwriter, I'm assuming he uses that word purposefully. It's a sequence they had initially wanted to include in the original Jurassic Park movie, but they didn't have time for it. So the sequence has to make sense within that movie's version of the narrative, and it's not one of the many changed sequences. It has to make sense within the plot of Jurassic World Rebirth that we know so far, and finally it's from the first novel specifically, so it's not to do with the DX disease, which isn't mentioned in the original novel. With that in mind, I'd love to read your ideas for what sequence he's talking about in a comment down below. I've read the Jurassic Park novel many times, but I must confess I had to look through the chapter summaries on the Jurassic Park wiki to refresh my memory on specific sequences. And I have 2 in particular that I think are very possible. Honestly, there are many sequences that, as long as they take some liberties with them, make some changes to them, they could make work. It's impossible to predict which one it will be exactly. We'll just have to wait and see. But here are my 2 guesses. One is wishful thinking, the other has some support behind it. The first sequence, and the one that came to mind right away, was the Tyrannosaurus Rex attacking Grant and the Murphy kids on the raft. We often refer to this as a scene, the raft scene, and from my memory it was one scene, but no, it is in fact a sequence built out of 3 different scenes, possibly even more. But there are 3 separate scenes that take place on the raft that involve the Rex attacking them. First is when they find the raft while the T-Rex is sleeping and they have to quietly inflate it. When they are just drifting away, Lex coughs, waking up the T-Rex, and to their surprise and horror, she's an excellent swimmer and goes after them until the juvenile Rex calls out to its mother and she returns to the shore. The second encounter is when the trio is heading down the river in the raft and the T-Rex attacks them again, but this time the thick foliage lining the bank of the river prevents the T-Rex from being able to get to them. And the raft sequence also includes a scene where they see 2 Dilophosaurus drinking from the river and then perform a mating dance. The end of the river sequence is when there's another encounter with the Rex, with the added issue of a waterfall that the raft falls down. So not only do Grant and the kids nearly get eaten, they nearly drown too. This is the climax of the sequence. The T-Rex raft attack is immensely popular among fans, probably because of the surprise factor of the T-Rex getting into the water. I've seen it appear on many people's wish lists for it being included in one of the movies, but it hasn't been included so far. This scene totally makes sense in the original Jurassic Park. I can really imagine this as part of the adventure Grant goes on with the kids getting back to the visitor center. More time for them to bond, which is an important part of movie Grant's character arc. And I also think it fits into Jurassic World Rebirth. We've seen them trudging through the mangrove swamp. Maybe they get into a raft or a canoe or a kayak at some point. Unfortunately, I did find this quote on the Jurassic Park wiki from David Koepp that he apparently never wanted to include the river raft sequence. However, I do want to point out that in the quote he says the raft sequence served as an obligatory tour past all the dinosaurs in the park and that he wanted total chaos. But the parts of the sequence that include the T-Rex are total chaos. I wouldn't suggest including everything Grant and the kids see and do while traveling along on the raft. And as it says later, there were apparently plans to also film several other scenes that originally did take place during the novel's river raft sequence. The T-Rex sleeping and the attack after they reach the waterfall. So, I don't know, I think maybe what Koepp meant with his quote was that he didn't want the full river raft tour, but maybe parts of it were on the wish list. Let me know what you think. If you like the idea of seeing the raft sequence in Jurassic World Rebirth, give the video a like. The other sequence that I unearthed while reading through the chapter summaries is John Arnold's mission to turn on the power in the maintenance shed. He goes down into the maintenance shed and knows there is a raptor in there as well, but he foolishly thinks they will be thwarted by the stairs. Unfortunately for him, the raptor just jumps down the stairs and thus was able to attack and kill him. Donald Gennaro, who was a very different character in the novel than he was in the film, goes into the same maintenance shed and is also attacked by the velociraptor. He escaped that attack but is wounded and is swarmed by compies afterwards, but that too he survives and is found and rescued by Alan Grant. I love this part of the novel for putting the raptors in such a dark and cramped space. It actually inspired a sequence in my own Jurassic audiobook, that's how much I loved it. We saw some of this in the original Jurassic Park film. Ellie Sattler has a raptor encounter in the maintenance shed, albeit brief, and of course she infamously finds Ray Arnold's arm, which is a great and horrific surprise for the viewer. But the sequence with Arnold getting attacked and then someone finding him and getting attacked as well, possibly by compies too, fits perfectly into the movie. Again, I love the surprise reveal of the arm, and seeing the raptor chase both Arnold and Ellie in the same environment might have felt a little too much of the same, but it also does really feel like it could have been there originally and it was just cut. And, well, it probably was, as we see in this bit of trivia. Ray Arnold was supposed to have had more screen time after he sets off to the maintenance shed, but due to Hurricane Iniki and its destruction of the Jurassic Park sets, Samuel L. Jackson was unable to complete it. It seems like they intended to include this attack, that they really wanted to have this in their movie, making it a bit more likely, in my opinion, that this is the part of the novel they are now repurposing for Jurassic World Rebirth. Again, adaptations would be made, but all you need to set this up is an enclosed space our characters need to go into for some purpose, and then sneak a raptor in there to attack them. In any case, I'm ecstatic that there is a bit of novel DNA getting spliced into Jurassic World Rebirth, and I cannot wait for that trailer. I'm very happy that David Koepp reread both novels in preparation of this, and I hope that means that alongside this very literal novel sequence that he said is going to be included, that there's also going to be smaller bits sprinkled throughout, and that it will really capture the vibe of the novels and of the original movie. Subscribe to stay up to date on all of the news. Check out last week's video on leaks confirming a surprising rumor, or if you're curious, check out my audiobook, which includes many novel references. Thank you so much for watching, liking, subscribing, and until next time. Fingers crossed for that trailer next week.